Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in to a special one-off show that I am hosting today. We are calling this one the Meatball Hour. I'm Dave Kluge, and there has been a lot of Bears news over the last week or so, and there are plenty of things to talk about. So I am joined with two of my favorite analysts and notorious Bears fans, Mike Tagliere with FantasyPros and Adam Rank with NFL Network. A lot of the times we do these shows that are really analytically forward, but if you're looking for that today, this probably isn't going to be that. There's been a lot of stories that have caused some emotional trauma over the last week or so, and we're going to dive into that with our unbiased opinion and our Bears hats on. So first, let me introduce Mike Tagliere. Why don't you tell everybody what you've got going on right now? I know this is a busy time for you gearing up for the NFL draft.
Oh, I mean, what don't I have going on? I'm just happy to be here today to talk with some friends. Basically, this is a podcast that I was looking forward to because we're always talking about fantasy football and this and that, and how I can't wait for Packers fans to tune in and hear me talk about the Bears because I think some people, just because I'm a Bears fan, think that I automatically associate that with my fantasy analysis, and it's just not true at all. In fact, I think you're going to hear a lot of complaining today on today's show. I think it's going to be fun, though. It's going to be like sitting around with a bunch of friends just talking about some football. So I'm looking forward to it. But if you guys want to check out my work, it's all on FantasyPros.com.
Yeah, and then you're still in Chicago, but you're going to be moving to Nashville soon. I'm from Chicago originally, and I moved out to Colorado. And then Adam Rank, also from Chicago, but living in California now. So we don't really get that opportunity to just sit around in Chicago and talk sports and Bears. So this is fun. And then Adam, I've been a huge fan of you and your work for a long time. Absolutely thrilled to have you on the show. Thank you for making time. I know this is also a busy time for you, so why don't you let everybody know what you've got going on as well?
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's an honor to be on with both of you. And obviously, with the NFL draft coming up, we're doing a lot of our draft prep a little bit different. No combine this year, but the pro days have been pretty cool. And I kind of like the setup. I know that a lot of people like the combine because I think that they love the camaraderie of it and everybody meeting up in one spot. But I think, the pro days have been good. So I'll be dropping a mock draft next week, depending on when you're listening to it. Although mine's always a little bit different because I don't predict picks. I tell everybody what they should do. And a lot of times I do pretty well. But last year I told the Chargers not to take Justin Herbert. I'm glad they didn't listen to me. But a lot of times, I do that. But you can check that out on NFL.com. NFL Network, I have my own YouTube channel at youtube.com/AdamRankNFL, where we talk a lot of Bears and we talk, because what's funny, Mike, is I use my YouTube channel to talk a lot of Bears stuff. Even though I find a way to sneak it in to my NFL coverage, I do use my YouTube page for that and fantasy.
I've noticed that. And when I first got started in this industry, so many people told me, they said, don't let people know who you're a fan of. You want to be as unbiased as possible. And I did that for the first few months, just stuck strictly to football, strictly to fantasy. And I just wasn't really having fun. And then I just started embracing the Bears fan of it. And, it's helped me make some connections in the industry. And I love that about you, Adam, that you're always just, wearing that on your sleeve, making as much Bears content as you can.
Well, I appreciate that. You know what's funny, though? You gotta point out, I think it was Bill Simmons he's the Boston sports guy. I think he was the first one who tore down the wall. And now everybody's like, oh, we can talk about our favorite, because it's stupid not to. Should I pretend like I didn't grow up in a household of Bears fans? That's how you connect with people. Even if you're not a Bears fan, there's still some sort of connection. So I'm sorry, Dave. I interrupted.
But that was something that Bill Simmons really kind of wore on his sleeve too. I mean, I don't know what his handle is now, but back in the day, I remember it was at the sports guy, and he tried to make it that he was a fan first and an analyst second.
Yeah.
And man, I miss Grantland. I don't know if you guys were
same
into that site when that game, but that was my favorite sports site ever. It was a shame to see that go away. But we have a lot of content to hit on. Not only are we going to talk about the free agent transactions, but we're also going to talk about a few other things, some history lessons, and then obviously, since we're talking about Chicago, we're going to have to talk about some beef and pizza and some stuff like that. So we'll dive into all that. But let's start with the freshest story right now. Just a few hours ago, Damian Williams, Super Bowl hero from 2019, just agreed to a one-year deal with the Chicago Bears. Now, he's 28 years old, and he didn't have a lot of success early on in his career when he was in Miami, but he became an absolute stud in Kansas City down the stretch in 2018 and into 2019. So he didn't play last year because of the COVID concerns, but now his legs are going to be fresh, and you've got Tariq Cohen coming back from this ACL injury that ended his entire season. So David Montgomery had this stretch at the end of the season where he just went on a tear. A lot of that was due to his soft schedule and, Tariq Cohen not being there. So now this backfield in 2021 is going to look very, very different than what we saw David Montgomery able to succeed in last year. So Tags, I'll start with you on this one, but is this Damian Williams something affecting your rankings for David Montgomery at all? And if so, what are you expecting next season compared to what he did last year?
I mean, I don't think it's going to affect it too much. I think David Montgomery was a bit overvalued to begin with, to be fair. If you look at his career over the first, 19 games that he played with Tariq Cohen, he saw more than 3 targets 3 times. And then when Tariq Cohen was out, he saw 5 targets a game, basically. And that's where a lot of his value came from. Now, of course, there were the cake matchups towards the end of the 2020 season, which kind of propped up his rushing numbers over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, I think it was. So, yes, it is going to impact it a little bit, but I already had him lower than most. I have him as like a low-end RB2, high-end RB3. I think, honestly, to the point where Kenyon Drake signed in with the Raiders, I think that I'm kind of going to put David Montgomery in that group because you have Kenyon Drake competing for touches there. Neither offense is going to be like, they're not going to be the Chiefs offense. They're going to be throwing up a ton of points on the board. So I don't think that double-digit touchdowns are something that we should necessarily expect. But losing that floor from the receiving volume, that affects his fantasy stock quite a bit. And it's going to affect Tariq Cohen. And the reason, and we get to be Bears fans here, right? We get to talk about our frustrations. The reason that I hate this signing is because Matt Nagy forces things. One of the things that I loved when Matt Nagy was hired is that he came forward and said, I don't know what my expectations are. He's like, I have to figure out everybody's strengths and utilize them to their strengths. And he has not done that. He basically, as the years went on, his first season went pretty well. I think not many people knew what to expect from him as a head coach, and it worked out well. And from then on, he started forcing things. And it's like we've continually seen that. So now that he's bringing a guy back in from Kansas City, it's like he's forcing another piece into his offense. And I think you're going to see it's going to affect David Montgomery. It's going to affect Tariq Cohen. And unfortunately, this is not an offense that supports multiple running backs when they're both on the field or all on the field. So I think you're looking at him as like right around that RB 24 to 26 range in my rankings. That's probably where I'm going to wind up with him. So I
think that's a pretty fair value for him, low end RB2. But what we saw last year, I think that was his peak performance down the stretch. Yeah. But I love that call out that you said about Matt Nagy when he came in here saying that he was going to play to his players' strengths, because then what you've seen is not that at all. You've got Mitch Trubisky who has legs and let's get this guy out of the pocket. Let's get him running. And you never saw it happen. You've got Allen Robinson, one of the best downfield threats in the league, and you just got him running slants. So yeah, it's frustrating to see. Now, Adam, I already saw your quick, very short take on Twitter. And I like it. You said that he is kind of coming in, Damian Williams, that is, to fill in the Cordero Patterson role. So
yeah.
Is that all you
when it's 4th and short, it's 4th and 3. Here comes the toss to Damian Williams. How does every offensive or defensive coordinator rather not see that coming? Like that, Moody and I were talking about that. And I guess that I just have David Montgomery appropriately valued, as a 4th, maybe 5th round pick, an RB2. Hopefully I will have already had a stud at the top of the draft or something like that, and David Montgomery comes in. His targets per game, it's kind of skewed because he had 9 in week 17 against the Packers. So don't get too fooled by total targets. He's never going to be that guy. The only thing that I really like is that I think he's a really good running back. And if they improve on the offensive line, and if for whatever reason, if Bill Lazor or whoever it is can just be like, dude, run the GD ball for a change. Like that, I thought was kind of one of the more significant upgrades. Of course, they had 2 cake matchups against the Packers, but I thought just committing to the run would help. And then I shouldn't have faith in Nagy to do that. Although I will say, talking about playing to players' strengths, a lot of what happened to Mitch Trubisky, and this is I don't want to blame him too much. It all comes back to Harrison Smith ruining his shoulder. Because in that first season, his first season with Nagy, when he was starting in 2018, when they made the run to the playoffs, Mitch was getting out of the pocket a lot. And then he got popped. Then he hurt his shoulder. And then Chase Daniel had to come in for a couple of weeks. I thought he changed after that. He could never run the ball like he did. And the limited success that he had at the end of the 2020 season went back to him being like, well, I got to do it for my career now, and I got to run. Like, if somebody could convince him to run and be like, bro, you're not going to get hurt, you're fine. I think he's in a great spot in Buffalo. Like as Mark Sessler put it, the vegan version of Josh Allen. That was such a great, I was calling him the low-cal Michelob Ultra Josh Allen, but I think vegan Josh Allen's way better. But
Yeah, that fit is just great because, God forbid something does happen to Josh Allen. They can just keep the offense. It'll be a much
100%.
more watered down version, but yeah, they can keep the offense rolling with Mitch under center.
No, I agree with all that. I feel like we're just wasting time till Mike LaFleur becomes our coach.
Oh God, I hope not. But
what are you saying? Like it's inevitable. Oh my God. Do you not think, like I was sitting there, I don't know, for whatever reason, I was looking up something with the Jets. And I was like, because I'm like, oh yeah, who was there? I'm like, Mike LaFleur. Oh God, the Jet. Like we're gonna hire. Like it is gonna be such a Bears thing to like, we'll fire Nagy, and then they'll be like, well, let's hire the brother of the Packers coach, and be like, this is gonna be another 3 years of this S. Can we just let's just fire? Like, you got to keep certain members of the organization are just family. So like they're not going anywhere. And if Ted Thompson's going to whatever, like just I really do still believe in my heart of hearts, they're going to bring in Theo and let him run it. And hopefully he'll have some out of the box hires because I'm ready for it. I'm like, nothing else has worked. Why not go that direction? Sorry, I'm taking us off course. Sorry.
No, I love it. And I think that a lot of Bears fans would like to see that considering what he was able to do. And we'll get to that a little bit later, whether it's time to completely blow up the team and rebuild, whether we're already past that steps, what we can do. But before we get to that, there's another big story. We're just going to start off with the two big stories right off the bat, get them out of the way, and then we can go into some other stuff. Andy Dalton, 33 years old. He's got 10 seasons under his belt, former second-round pick. But the big glaring thing on his resume is that he has an 0-4 playoff record. So whiffing on Russell Wilson, nothing happening with Deshaun Watson. Those are obviously pretty heartbreaking, but disregarding that, assuming that Russell Wilson wasn't something that was catching our attention, are you happy with Andy Dalton? Do you think that's somebody that's going to make the team better than the quarterback situation we had last year? Adam, if you want to start on this one, and then we can get your opinion tags.
Well, I want to see what happens with the draft. That if they end up with one of the quarterback, if they draft a quarterback and Andy Dalton is the bridge, like that's palatable. I really do believe last season they should have gone in on Andy Dalton instead of trading for Nick Foles. And I thought with Bill Lazor coming in, it just made sense. Like just bring in Dalton. Like if you're not going to draft anybody, that seemed like a better fit for us. Even though that, everybody, and I didn't mind Nick Foles coming in, but I think I was, what his limitations were. But I think the one thing that Bears fans would just love is just to have our own quarterback. Is just to have some guy, like we just want our dude. Like I want to go into a season feeling that we can win just because our quarterback is so good. That's the way Packers fans live. Like they're wrong because they're not going to win, but at least they go into every season thinking like we got a chance because we got Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre. You've had 30 years of that. By the way, 30 years of that, 2 rings. Let me run down the rings of Packer quarterbacks for you real quick. Brett Favre, 1. Aaron Rodgers, 1. Jim McMahon, 1. Boom. Jim McMahon, as a Packer, has as many Super Bowl rings as Favre, and Rodgers, 2 overall, of course, as the starting quarterback with the Chicago Bears in 85. My thing, I just want that. I just want that feeling once. And I think that's why so many people got attached to Russell Wilson and wanted, and listen, like, I would not have gone all in and gone as loco with it if Wilson didn't have us on our list. Then you're like, oh, what? Like he wants Russell. It's like if you're in high school and you don't think you have any shot with this girl, but you find out like, oh no, that girl really likes you. You're like, what? That doesn't make sense, but I'm in now. And I'm pushed everybody else aside. That's what it was for me. I just want to have a quarterback that we can call our own because, the 3, I've said this for years and somebody stole this joke recently and got 40,000 likes on it on Twitter, but it was cool because they didn't steal the punchline. But the 3, like legitimately, the 3 best Bears quarterbacks of my lifetime have been McMahon, Cutler, and Walter Payton on the halfback option. And that's it. And props to the guy. When you steal that joke, you didn't steal the Walter Payton punchline. I don't know if I should be commending you or if I should be like, you at least go all the way and take the whole goddamn, sorry, take the whole thing. Sorry.
That's fine. Don't worry about it, Adam. And it's something, I don't know that feeling really, what it's like to go in and year out and have that
never
comfortability. And we did for a split second in 2009 when Cutler came in. It's like, all right, we finally got a young franchise quarterback, and we'll talk about Cutler a little bit later. But Tags, how are you feeling about Andy Dalton? Do you think? And first of all, I want to call out what you say. I love the idea of him being a bridge quarterback, like getting Mac Jones at 20, and then just having Dalton for this year, that would be fantastic. But this year, more than likely, we're going to see 16 games of Andy Dalton. And how does that make you feel, Tags?
Well, I liked what Adam said about Dalton last year. I would have preferred to get Dalton last year. He was free. And we trade for the contract that Nick Foles had. It was a joke. And I think this is a problem with Ryan Pace, is that I don't necessarily mind what he's done in the draft. And I understand that some people are going to be pissed about it. They're going to talk about Mitch Trubisky, you traded up to number 2 and this and this and this. If you go back to that year, a lot of people had Trubisky atop their boards. They really
100%.
did. And you can go back retrospect, and hindsight analysis is the worst analysis there is. So if you have conviction that someone's your quarterback, and you went into that draft saying he's going to be our quarterback no matter what we have to do, I don't mind what they did, because if Trubisky worked out, no one remembers that second round pick they traded to move up. No one remembers that at all. But Trubisky didn't work out, and I think that a product of that is on Matt Nagy, because he's just not utilizing players to their strengths. And does it have to do with that hit? I don't know, because it seemed like every single time Mitch Trubisky got hurt, he'd come back into the lineup and he would struggle, and he had to regain that confidence. Then he'd start to play well, and then he'd get hurt again, or something happened. And it was always something. Andy Dalton, I think he better fits what Matt Nagy wants to do on offense. If you go back to one of Matt Nagy's best years, was with Alex Smith in Kansas City. He was more of a pocket passer. He did have some mobility, obviously, before that leg injury took place. But I do think that Dalton is going to be better than Trubisky. He's going to be better than Foles, but that's not saying much. But the Bears franchise as a whole isn't a real problem. And I think Ryan Pace has continually tried to solve that problem, after going Mike Glennon and then drafting Trubisky and then grabbing Foles. And now it's like he's going after Russell Wilson. And apparently, from all that we've heard, he went really hard after Russell Wilson and basically gave enough to where if the Seahawks were going to accept the trade, it was going to be the Bears. So I think Ryan Pace is trying to deliver Chicago that quarterback that can make us feel good. Unfortunately, he's just going all in on the wrong players. You know what I mean? Where it's like Mike Glennon was a guy I didn't like. Trubisky, I did. I felt like Trubisky could have been a player in the league, and I still don't want to close the book on him just because I feel like there's some untapped potential there. Didn't like Foles. Dalton's fine, but the problem now with the franchise is I think we're in this mediocrity hell that basically our defense is going to slowly start to take a step back. Danny Trevathan's already backing off a little bit. Khalil Mack is going to start declining a little bit as the years go on. We now cut Kyle Fuller. We're talking about trading Akeem Hicks, and it's like, all of a sudden, it's like if the defense regresses, Andy Dalton's not the quarterback that can carry you to a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Where if we had the defense we did 2 years ago and Andy Dalton was the quarterback, I would have been psyched about that, because we had a down. That was one of the funnest defenses I've ever watched play the game.
Yeah.
But now we're at a point where it's like we're in this hell, and it's like you have to decide: are we blowing everything up, or are we contending? And I don't think Andy Dalton's good enough to carry this team with a declining defense. So, am I happy with it? No, but I mean, if we couldn't get Russell Wilson, was it the next best step? Probably, because I don't want Ryan Pace sending away more draft picks and basically screwing over the future GM in order to try and save his job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because who are the other? Yeah, because the other veterans. I mean, I think if you even started checking down the list of guys who I had listed coming into this year, and you think like Marcus Mariota just re-signed with the Raiders, so it seemed like he was unobtainable, similar to Derek Carr. Sam Darnold, maybe, depending on what the Jets do at number 2. Gardner Minshew now looks like he's going to be on the move. Again, Dalton just kind of fits into that mix. And like Tags is talking about, at least it didn't cost anything. I mean, the salary, but you didn't have to trade. So like, whatever. That's what it is. Whatever.
That's kind of how I feel. I saw somebody make a comparison that I like, though, and they said that this is kind of similar to Miami's quarterback situation last year. Obviously, Tua and Dalton are very, very different players, but just the fact that, you've got Andy Dalton that can go out there and be the game manager, but he's not somebody that's going to be able to win games for you. So then, if you're down and playing from behind, do what they did, where they bench Tua and then put Fitzpatrick in. Do the same thing with Nick Foles. He's the gunslinger. Just let him throw the ball downfield then. So I don't know if I could see them going that route, but it is an interesting way to think about it, that, if they're down, just plug in, Foles and let him do his thing.
Does part of you guys wonder if the Bears front office said, or the ownership said, Ryan Pace, you don't have the ability to trade a first round pick? Because, Carson Wentz, we were tied to him, and apparently the Bears were offering a second. And then Sam Darnold, that name keeps coming up, and I don't even know if the book's closed on that. But do we think that maybe Bears ownership said, Ryan Pace, you guys are on the hot seat right now, and if you don't get it done this year, show them big improvements, you guys are both gone. Did they take away future first round picks from them? Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think that they had a first-round pick on the table for Russell Wilson, didn't they?
Yeah.
From
They
what I was
did,
hearing,
but that would have been like the one thing where it's like that's a can't miss. Like I have
Yeah, we'll
friends
make
that aren't
an
even big
exception.
football fans that legitimately go, "Hey, if the Bears get Russell Wilson, are they going to screw him up?" And I said, "Well, one, you can't screw up Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
You know, that's
The
you're unable
Seahawks
to
have
do
tried
that.
and they can't.
Right.
Yeah.
But I said too, like you can not use him to like his complete strengths, which is again what the Seahawks have done. But that's like one of those quarterbacks that he's an all-time great. Like that's a quarterback you don't miss on. Whereas even if I'm in ownership, I'm like Ryan Pace. I don't. Did anybody ever ask you guys that question though? I'm like the biggest Russell Wilson fan there is. I think that he's potentially Drew Brees and maybe even better because he's got some mobility to his game. But
way better.
But here's my question to you guys. Someone brought it up and they asked me about it. And I said, I don't know if I could do it. If you were to send 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and Khalil Mack, would you do that for Russell Wilson? And as much as I love Russ, I mean, I don't know if you could do that because it handicaps your franchise to put players around him. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And then you're hoping that, what do you even do for the next few years if you've got no picks? You've got to hope that Mooney ends up becoming, his absolute ceiling. You got to hope that Anthony Miller bounces back. You got to hope
Not under Nagy.
Yeah. So it's that's an interesting way to put it. Part of me even wonders if Russell Wilson really wanted to come here. When you look at that team, the 4 teams that he laid out, the Bears were the one that really jumped off the paper. And part of me wonders if they were like, let's just throw the Bears in the mix just to put a little heat on these other teams because they're going to see Chicago in the mix and they know Chicago is going to do something crazy. So maybe this will make the Raiders, take it a little bit more seriously. Part of me wonders if Russell Wilson was really planning to come to Chicago.
Don't take that from me. Just let me have that. That's all I want. I just want to have. Let's just pretend he liked Matt Nagy. Who knows? Maybe he loves Chicago.
When you're that good, when you're Russell Wilson, like think about it. Like in his mind, though, I started asking that question though too. I'm like, why would he want to come to Chicago? I'm like, well, he could be the savior essentially because if you come, he legitimately he throws one pass as a Chicago Bear. He's the best quarterback the Bears have ever had, and that's crazy for a franchise that is this
historic. Since the 20s, and it's funny. I mean, the guy went to college, at least for a year, at Wisconsin, so he's familiar with how the Midwest operates and everything like that. And honestly, if the Bears won, and we're talking about modern NFL, I don't really remember 85 or anything like that. But you look at what the Cubs did and the way that they packed Grant Park and the Bulls run and the Last Dance and everything, none of that would even compare to the Bears winning a Super Bowl. Like it would be such a monumental thing that I think that any quarterback, any player in the NFL should want to do that.
Yeah.
Should want to go. Like I want to be that guy in Chicago.
To be the guy to turn it around. Yeah, sure.
And I was talking to Sigmund Bloom just a couple of weeks ago and we were having this conversation and he made a really good point. He said, there's some football players that are football players first, but there are a handful of guys that just have a bigger picture thing going on and football is kind of on the side for them. And that's, your Tom Brady's and your Russell Wilson's. And for Russell Wilson, he's already made his career as an NFL player. He has nothing to prove at this point. So for him to come to Chicago and win a Super Bowl, that would just define a legacy that would be almost unmatched at that point. But at this point, there's still a possibility that we can make a run next year. I think another reason that they didn't want to move him is because they already committed his salary to him for 2020.
Yeah.
So there's a chance something could happen next year, but man, how many times have I gotten my hopes up for a big free agent to be crushed?
But it is, it's interesting because I was writing, I'm going to be turning in a story this afternoon at NFL.com about the biggest rivalries for 2021, not historical rivalries, but stuff that's budding for 2021. And I think the Seahawks and the Russell Wilson thing is going to be very interesting because every time that Russell Wilson takes a hit or they lose a game or a lineman misses a block, it's going to be a huge story. Like, hey, could this be it? Is this what's going to turn Russell Wilson? And if the Bears end up being not very good, and let's say that they have a season like Jacksonville last year, and you're like, oh my gosh, the Bears are careening towards one of the top picks in the draft, then it becomes a little bit more serious that Russell Wilson could be traded. Because I think if the Bears were in the position where the Jets were right now, I think that they could have pulled off a trade and it probably wouldn't have been as expensive as all the stuff that they were having to give up because you would have had the look, you guys can get a quarterback right now. You can take whoever you want after Trevor Lawrence. And so I think that it could have been very possible. So I think that next year I wouldn't rule it out. And I don't want to throw away a season because it's not fair to the guys who are playing this year.
Right.
But it's just something that's going to be overlooking the season. And if the Bears are good, like if the Bears are good, if they're mediocre again, if they're 8-8, then everybody's going to be like, look, they're blowing their chance for Russell Wilson. There's going to be fans like, we should just tank. Like, yeah, go tell Khalil Mack to tank.
Right.
Like, that's not cool.
Yeah. Tanking for a 32-year-old quarterback. That would be one of the most Bears moves I've ever seen before. Not even tanking for the number 1 overall pick to get that prospect. Just tanking for a good enough pick that you can try to entice the Seahawks to get rid of Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
So the one other, there's been 3 big stories if you consider Damian Williams, Andy Dalton, and the other big one has been Allen Robinson. And that's one where I love Allen Robinson. I mean, I'd go as far as saying that he is my favorite wide receiver in the league. I think that what he's done throughout his career, going back to his Mitch McGloin days, I mean, it's just unbelievable how this man has produced without any quarterback play. Now, there was some weird speculation that he was saying, he said, I'm not going to sign my franchise tag tender anytime soon. And everyone took that as him threatening to hold out. That was laid to rest about 3 days later when he signed it. But how are you feeling about Allen Robinson now? Obviously, he's a lock for 1,000 yards and 150 targets almost every single season. With Andy Dalton, are you expecting that same type of production next year? What about you, Adam? What are you thinking?
Production-wise, he's going to be good. I think what it comes down to ultimately is what are you doing to this guy? Like, I selfishly was happy that they put the tag on him because, number one, I didn't want him to walk away, especially not for anything. But if you're going to do that, I think that you need to make the commitment of extending him. Like, that's fine. Like, I understand that it's a negotiating ploy and everything like that, but to take away one of it, and he'll be paid very handsomely this season, but it's like, I would still just like to see the commitment to him because he's young enough to where you're like, okay, let's run him out for a couple more years. Let's give him that extension. Let him get paid. He deserves that. I know he's already had one payday, and choosing the Bears is one of his paydays. By the way, if I can bring this up too, by the way, and I agree with you, Dave. Like, Allen Robinson, probably he might be my favorite player in the league right now. I think not even receiver. I'll just say favorite player in the NFL right now. Here's the thing, because I know a lot of Packers fans say this, like, you could have chosen the Packers, blah, blah, blah. Have we ever has anybody ever thought about this? Like, everybody in the NFL wants to play with Tom Brady. They do whatever it takes to play with Tom Brady. They want to play with Tom Brady. Everybody, every time there's a free agent, like, oh, Tom Brady. How come no major superstar ever wants to play with Aaron Rodgers? Aaron Jones is the first guy in his prime offensively who has ever signed with the Packers who I can remember. Why is that? Packers fans? Tell me. Nobody want to go to his birthday party?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And the thing, it's not like Tom Brady. It's not like you're going to go play with him and he's going to inflate your numbers and help you get another huge contract. He's going to spread the ball out and not really help you that much as a player, where Aaron Rodgers, when he finds a guy he likes, he's going to force feed him. So, yeah, it would make sense. But I think that might be more of the Packers organization, but you can still in free agency than it is people not wanting to play there.
No, I think it's not wanting to play there. Because the money, like, you will get paid, like, they're going to pay you money to go there. But the agent, like, if you were a wide receiver and you're like, hey, you can take all this money from the Raiders, or you can go play with the Packers. Like, I'll take a little less to play for the Packers. You've never heard that. Who's taking less money to go play with the Packers? Nobody.
Only Aaron Jones.
Only Aaron Jones.
That's the only one. So Tags, how are you feeling about Allen Robinson? Just kind of looping back to that a little bit. I mean, I don't know if you've gone through your full projections for the season yet, but Andy Dalton might be the best quarterback that Allen Robinson's ever played with, but I don't really know how much that's saying. So are you expecting that same 150 target season or what?
Most likely, considering the talent on the team or lack thereof. They're talking about trading Anthony Miller. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded during the draft. So, I mean, these are things to watch as it goes on. So that's why I typically try not to do projections until after the draft, because there's so much that can change in that process. But I think in the end, I think Allen Robinson, this is going to work out. This is almost like karma for him, like benefiting from, like, wide receivers. You're seeing guys like Will Fuller, Juju Smith-Schuster take $8 and $10 million contracts for 1 year. And meanwhile, Allen Robinson's going to get paid handsomely on that franchise tag. And I think he's going to cash in after this year. You're going to see him get a long-term deal, whether it be with the Bears or another team. But he's continually going on social media and saying he wants to play for a team that has a chance to win a Super Bowl. He wants to win. And it's almost like that Russell Wilson thing. Like, what does Allen Robinson have to accomplish at this point? You already know he's good at football. It's like he wants to win a Super Bowl. And it's like, I think we saw that with Mike Evans this year, like grow up, because he was a guy that was very temperamental, would have temper tantrums on the field. And then Tom Brady gets there. He matured so much. Mike Evans became such a better player this year, even if his numbers weren't as consistent as they were in years past. But Allen Robinson's talked about that. So Robinson's answer to the Bears when they talk about him in free agency, it was like, I can only want to be here as much as they want me here. That's basically what it comes down to. So when he says something like that, he doesn't feel wanted here. And why the hell would you want to stay in a relationship if you're not wanted? They're forcing him to stay for another year, which, good for us as Bears fans, because as you guys mentioned, I'm a big Robinson fan. Like I don't have very many signed jerseys, but I have a signed Allen Robinson jersey. Love him as a player. And I do, like, he's got to do what's best for him. But, I think in the end, I think he got what was coming to him this year with the franchise tag. And it's actually a good thing. And I say that got what was coming to him as a good thing, because he's going to get paid more than he would have taking a 1-year deal on the open market, right. And he'll earn more after this year, because Andy Dalton, as we saw with Dalton, like, even though he's not great, he propped up, and AJ Green was perfectly fine with him for a lot of years. So I do expect him to be perfectly fine this year.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the big thing I looked at is you look at the stats that Allen Robinson has put up over the last few years, and they're almost identical to what AJ Green did during that entire 7-year stretch that he had with Andy Dalton. So I'm expecting to see, something kind of similar where he's going to be looking his way a lot. But then the thing that scares me is you got to put yourself in Allen Robinson's shoes. He's been wanting this long-term deal for almost 2 years now. He's been publicly saying that he wants this long-term deal. They hit him with the franchise tag, and then the very next day they turn around and they're bringing in Kenny Galladay, trying to bring him in on a long-term deal. So I completely understand Allen Robinson's frustrations. And I just wrote this in an article recently, but he was in that tier with, Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, and I've kind of moved him to the bottom of that tier now, just because we've seen this in years past where people start milking injuries when they're unhappy with contract situations. We saw it last year with Kenny Galladay. We saw it with Le'Veon Bell, and it just worries me a little bit. I think that if we can get full commitment that, his situation changes and he's happy with the Bears, he's locked in as a wide receiver 1 again. But the way things are going right now, it just seems like there's some risk that's going to be baked into his value next year, whether he's going to play a full 16 games or not. So let's get off the topic of the Bears real quickly. And this is because this is something that I have made a conscious effort to try to let everybody know, and you guys have talked about this a little bit as well, but people, when they think of Chicago, they think of deep dish pizza automatically, this big casserole of cheesy pizza. And for me, that's not what I'm from. I grew up on the South Side, and I like that thin pizza. Michael Anthony's on the South Side is my absolute favorite place. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about that as well? What's your favorite pizza places and how you get it served in Chicago? Because as far as I know, you guys aren't deep dish guys either, right?
No.
Well,
Rank, I don't think you're a deep dish guy either. So it's funny because we're all like Chicago fans and fans of Chicago pizza, but mine is Pequod's. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had Pequod's pizza. It's on the north side. It's like an in between. It's not a deep dish. It's not a thin. I'm a fan of all pizza. Let me just be clear about that.
Right.
If I had my choice, like to rank my top 5 pizza, I don't know if I'd fit one deep dish in there. So I'm not really a deep dish guy. Is it good? Is it pizza? Yes, it's pizza, but it's just not. It's not my favorite. My favorite is like somewhere in between. Like if you do like a double dough or it's like a stuffed. I don't even know how to describe. It's like a caramelized crust that they do at Pequod's. It's so damn good.
I just hate getting like crapped on for Chicago pizza when it's deep dish, and I'm like, you guys don't even realize how many other pizzas there are. But I used to live a block away from Pequod's, and I don't know if they still do it, but what it used to be 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. you can get a 6-inch personal pizza and a beer for $5, and that's pretty much how I stayed alive during my early 20s, was eating that $5 lunch special.
That crust is so damn good, though, man. I don't know if they do it anymore, but man, that sounds good right now.
No, it's so good. And the deep dish is for the tourists. It's a special occasion. It's like birthday cake. Like nobody goes out for birthday cake unless it's specifically somebody's birthday. So you have somebody who comes into town, and honestly, I'm very guilty of this because I moved out of Chicago when I was young, is that every summer when I would go out there, we would have to at least do deep dish once. Like it was, it's a thing. We're in Chicago. Like I don't really get it out here in Southern California. So we're going to go out there. My mom, my parents are like, okay, yeah, we'll go. And, my uncle had to drive, and they always complained and things like that. But legitimately the best place, because my family lived a little bit more rural too, because my parents were in Schaumburg when we left, or Hoffman Estate. By the way, there was a controversy of like, because I had to get my birth certificate for like my not real ID, but for the TSA pre-check when I did it last year, and I got my birth certificate. I'm like, what the F? I'm from Hoffman Estates. Like, what is this? Is changing my whole worldview. And they're like, no, we moved or whatever. I'm like, this is crap. So I'm legit. I'm a Hoffman Estates guy. Like, it's life altering. But in any event, so my uncle lives in like, was it Newark? Sandwich? Whatever. Like, where it is. Like, it's out in the sticks. Like, the best place, like, there's all these places in Chicago. Oswego. Like, I don't know. I think this place was called Circle J or whatever it was. But it's a small pizza place that's attached to a liquor store. You know what I'm talking about? Like those places, like those are always the best. Yeah, like
the hole in the wall places are usually the best.
And it's got 3 booths, and it's got the old style on tap, and it's the place. And it's just the place that my dad, and my uncle want to sit there and drink all night and do whatever. And they got a tabletop Miss Pac-Man, like the place. Like those are always the best places, and that to me is Chicago pizza. So whenever people are like, oh, well, like Chicago style, I'm like, don't say that deep dish is Chicago style. It's thin crust. Like that's really kind of a Chicago style. And I know that people, because this got into a whole thing. Like I'm like, hey, like if you don't really understand, like if you've never had Chicago thin crust pizza, then don't sit here and like judge Chicago as a pizza place. And all the people are like, well, I'm from Italy. It's like, shut up. You're not from Italy. That's not even the conversation that I'm having. I'm not saying that Italy doesn't have great pizza. I'm just saying that if you're going to be dismissive of Chicago because you don't like deep dish, you're not getting the full story. Like you can't watch one episode of Ozark and be like, I know the whole thing. Like, no, you gotta watch the whole 3 seasons before you can make an accurate assessment. So don't come at me and be like, Chicago pizza sucks when the only thing that you've ever had is like Lou Malnati's or Giordano's or whatever, Gino's East or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, not that it's bad, but I'm saying you're not getting the full picture.
Well, thank you for supporting me on this take, because that is something that I have tried telling just about every single person that craps on deep dish pizza so far. And, having you guys backing me up on this will hopefully help make this voyage a little bit easier for me.
We should get more credit because we have more varieties. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like there's not other municipalities who like Detroit has a fine pizza. Mm-hmm. And New York thin crust is great, and St. Louis, whatever the hell they're doing, is whatever. But like, there's not a variety. Like, it's very specific. I'm just upset that people just look at one. It's just like saying, like, if you saw Patrick Mahomes and you're like, well, he's a running quarterback. You're like, well, he does a lot of other things. Yeah. Like, he's not a one-dimensional. Like, Chicago's not a one-dimensional pizza town like a lot of other cities. So back off, everybody. There's no contest.
They're all different times and types. So let's jump back to football. I had to plug that pizza thing because it's something I talked to you guys about before.
I love the Ozark shout out too. Ozark.
I'm in. I think I'm season 1 episode. I think I just finished episode 8.
You haven't watched the whole thing?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, Rank.
We'll have to come back for an Ozark show in a couple months.
You know what? This will be spoiler free. The one thing that I really love about it is that Jason, like the way it sets up. Jason, they could have written it like Jason Bateman, like had no idea that he was doing this thing for these guys. But like, I love that they're like, he willfully went into this. It's like, yeah, like that's good. It's a TV trope to be like, oh, the poor innocent guy gets caught up in this mischief. It's like, nope, he's a dick. He went into it knowing what he was doing.
Yep. So kind of like the Breaking Bad storyline. Like they didn't try making him look like he was this guy that ended up in a situation. Like he made that choice to get into that.
Yeah.
World. Yeah. Kind of like it. All right, let's get back to some depressing Bears talk here. So obviously, this isn't regarding any recent transactions, but I have heard blame pointed just on so many different people. And I want to hear who you guys think is most to blame. So I've heard some people say it's Nagy's fault because he's not bringing the best out of the players. I've heard people blame Gase for blowing first-round picks and not making the right moves in free agency. Some people say it's all Mitch, that he just couldn't get it together. A lot of people, myself included, say it's the O-line. And I've heard some people go as far as to say that it is the fan base, that they are just so ruthless and terrible that every person that comes to Chicago is destined to fail. So, Tags, let's start with you on this one. And I do actually kind of like the fans one a little bit. You know the story about Mitch Trubisky getting booed at a Bulls game, 2 or 3 days after he got drafted. And they said that was just it, that his confidence was shot from that point. But Tags, of all of the places you could place the blame on in this administration, who would you say is most at fault?
I think it's a mix of everything you just said, to be fair. And I think there's one important one you're leaving out, and it's the media. I think the media is a terrible place to play in Chicago in terms of like what it's done to people over the years. Like Jay Cutler, we're going to talk about Jay, I guess. But Jay, that guy could have been so much more had things gone differently, like in terms of the coaching and the media and what people perceived him as and not caring and all this and that, whatever. I'm a Jay Cutler fan, and I felt like he could have been more. But when you look at the franchise as a whole, I mean, it starts up top, right, with ownership. And you say, like, how do we have a franchise this big with this many fans, with this much money? Like people want to come to Chicago. Russell Wilson put us on one of those teams, like, and not win a Super Bowl since '85. Like, like to where you just not have a quarterback, ever have a franchise quarterback, one that we could like point to and say, that's our guy. That's the guy that everyone ties to this franchise. We've never had it. So I think it starts up top. Nagy obviously deserves a lot of blame for what he's doing on the field in terms of he was supposed to be the offensive mind. This was supposed to be the strength of the team. And the fact that we had Vic Fangio and then we moved on and we didn't really miss a beat. We kept playing well on defense, and that Nagy couldn't get the offense together. That's a problem. Trubisky obviously had his ups and downs, but I think part of that is miscasting him in your offense. Pace has been terrible in free agency. He's done really well in, after the first round of drafts. That's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily mind Ryan Pace. I wish he'd tone it down in free agency sometimes, especially when it comes to going after quarterbacks and trading for Nick Foles. There's a lot of things, but I think it's a mix of everything, to be fair. I don't think that you could place the blame on one thing, but again, it all comes back to the idea that it starts up top with ownership and being holding people accountable to do their jobs.
So real quickly, just to spin off of that, between Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, if you had to say that one of them is on a hotter seat heading into this season, who would you say it is?
I think they're tied together. Like I don't think there's any chance in hell that one of them gets fired and the other one doesn't. I think that it's either they both get fired after this year, or this team went to the playoffs and they outperformed what everyone expected them to. But in reality, I'm expecting both of them to be gone after this year.
And Steven, with a great poll here, you talked about the media. Remember when ABC had helicopters circling around Soldier Field while Parkey was practicing kicks? I mean, that whole thing, the double doink, turned into one of the biggest media circuses I had ever seen. But Adam, same question to you. Who would you say is the most to blame for this administration's, I guess, failures? There's no other way to really put it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it really does come down to the decisions that you make. And I was on board with Matt Nagy when he was hired. He was coming from the Chiefs system, even though, he was kind of, he didn't have an extensive background as an offensive coordinator calling the plays. I know Andy Reid threw him a bone here and there so he could go out there and get a job. I thought that was a reasonable hire, and you look at some of the other coaches who were hired around that time, like John DeFilippo and even Doug Peterson, is now gone. So there was, things happen. I don't mind that. And Ryan Pace, I thought, was a fine addition as an offensive as a GM for all the reasons that Tags pointed out. But at some point, you got to hit the thing with the quarterback, and it's elusive, and it's not something that's just problematic for the Bears, because I think there's a lot of parallels with the Cleveland Browns, and I'm sure there's a podcast or there's a stream going on right now with Browns fans, although their picture is a little bit rosier because Baker Mayfield looked pretty good. They had a huge playoff win over the Steelers last season. But you look at that, there was a meme with the Browns jersey and all the names and all the guys that they failed with, all the coaches they went through, all the different times that they've overturned their organization, how they moved, so you look at some of these Midwest teams, like the Browns have been going through it. The Detroit Lions actually had the quarterback right for over a decade and still couldn't surround him with the team to get them over the top, to where you're like, well, I wonder if it is the quarterback, or if our teams are just doomed, or if it's just something that you have like an ownership issue. Because at some point, you just look at the teams that are successful and you look at just the common denominator, and they're strong up top. And you wonder if Ted Thompson, who is like a son to this organization, but is he the guy? And I don't mind it. Like if he's not the person and you don't want to fire him, then it's fine. Like, kick him up a level, like bring somebody in. And I think at some point this is going to be it, because I'm willing to give Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace the benefit of the doubt because you have not had a losing season in 3 years. You've made the playoffs in 2 out of the last 3 years. That's pretty good. Like there's some organizations that don't even do that well. So I'm willing to say, okay, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens with Andy. Like you're running out of excuses though. There's only so much time that I can give you. It's like Ozark. It's like, okay, I need this. You're on a probationary period right now. This is it. Like you have to prove it. There's no more like, yeah, but we all like, nope, it is what it is at that point. Like we cannot go forward. Both these guys are going to be tied together. And you know what? If it works out, great. I mean, the worst thing that could, and I really do believe that they're going to be in a position where even if they finished, like they're in kind of a Lovie Smith position, where like he was fired after a 10-6 year,
right?
Which now a lot of people look back on and go, "What were we thinking?" Because that's another thing too. It's like if we're making the hires, are we going to make the right hires? You know, passing up on Bruce Arians, passing up. I don't know if Frank Reich would have been, you know, a good try. I don't know if he was really in the mix or anything like that. But it's like, man, like, are we going to do another John Fox thing? Are we going to do Tressman? Like, gosh, there's been some misses. Like, we almost could have hired Adam Gase instead of John Fox, if you think about that, because Adam Gase would have been like the hot offensive coordinator. But in any event, they haven't made the right hires. So at some point, you know, I think it just kicks up the organizational level. The media sucks, but the media sucks everywhere. Like, the only reason the media pressure is there is because people love this. Like, everybody's from Chicago. Yeah. Like, look at us. None of us. In a couple of weeks, sorry, but like we don't even live in Chicago, but we're still like supporters. Like that's the thing. Like that's the one draw of this team because it goes back so many generations. So there's going to be so much interest in it. So I don't know. It's a combination of everything. And if they just hit on the right quarterback, then it's going to change. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
I just wish there weren't so many ups and downs. Like, cause I remember when Cutler was playing extremely well in Chicago and everybody was sitting there watching and it was like, oh, wow, Jay. And then he broke his thumb on the sideline. I remember that because I remember the Bears fans freaking out and I listened to AM Sports Talk Radio and it was like the score they're talking about. What are the Bears going to do without Jay Cutler? And then, you know, when he finally comes back, he wasn't playing to that level. And it was just like, oh, Jay Cutler sucks again. And it's like, I just don't like the ups and downs that we go through as a franchise where it's like, yes, people are going to have bad times. Like they're going to go through rough points in their career, but it's like, you have to get through those to get to the good times. And I feel like I'm describing being a Bears fan, basically.
Yeah. And I'll never forget the media ripping Cutler apart when they said that he had something wrong with his knee. And then it turns out that, what was it? He tore his meniscus
MCL.
or his
MCL?
Yeah.
Torn MCL. Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's calling him soft. You know, why wasn't he getting back out there? It was a must-win game. It's like the man's got a torn ligament in his knee. So let's just carry on with this and just go right into the Jay Cutler talk. Tags, I know you're a fan. I am. Yeah. I have it in my Twitter bio, Jay Cutler apologist, and it's something that I think he never really got a fair shot. Adam, I'm not sure exactly how you feel about Cutler, but let's hear from you, Tags.
Is this a joke? Oh, sorry.
No, I haven't seen. I mean, I'm assuming that you also.
There's so many Instagram photos of my kids wearing Jay Cutler jerseys.
I do not follow you on Instagram. I'm sorry.
Gosh, dang it!
All right, I should have done.
Because people get mad. I'll start putting it on Twitter too. Because people get irate. Yeah. Like, why are you doing that to your kids? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's funny. Like, it's not funny, but it's like, I like Jay, and I know that. I'm sorry, Tags. I'm taking your spot.
No,
I will say this. I've had this verified with people, and I talked to one of the experts of like, hey, your coaching staff can screw you over or whatever, the organization. I really do contend if they would have if they wouldn't have brought in Mike Martz, and I think Mike Martz is the person who led to the downfall, because if you look at Kurt Warner's career, it was heightened because of Mike Martz, because the Greatest Show on Turf played so well. It was also shortened because that system is going to get your quarterback killed. And it shortened the career of Kurt Warner. It really impacted the career of Jay Cutler. And the whole fact that you traded away Greg Olson is just so inexcusable. Never let an offensive coordinator tell you that you need to get rid, like a valuable offensive weapon is out of place in your offense. I'd be like, well, you better learn how to make a new offense, right, or you can find yourself back on the unemployment line. And I just, if they would have just gone, and I know it's such a Bears, like Bears fans are kind of ridiculous to where like they only want to run. Like anytime that Matt Nagy dials up a pass, every Bears fan is pissed. Like, why aren't we running the ball 50 times a game? And it's like, okay, this isn't the 50s anymore. But they like that's the thing. But like if they would have just done a Chicagoland hire at offensive coordinator and just had a run-based offense for Jay, I think that the whole narrative would have changed. And who was the stupid team that allowed the Packers to get into the playoffs that year? Because that was the one thing you're like, oh, I think Tampa Bay lost or something stupid. Because think about that, like if the Packers don't make the playoffs that year, and the Bears are hosting the NFC Championship game, I think they beat anybody else that they're going up against. They go up, maybe they beat Pittsburgh, maybe they don't. But you're like, that's different. Like Jay Cutler as a Super Bowl quarterback is a lot different than Jay Cutler getting injured in the NFC Championship game. And I think his legacy is a lot different at that point.
Yeah. And the most succinct argument I have for this, I mean, when you look at the numbers, and you already called it out a little bit, quarterbacks just get hammered in that Mike Martz offense. And in his final year in Denver, Jay Cutler took 11 sacks. 11 sacks in the entire year. 16 games, he took 11 sacks. His first 4 years in Chicago, he took 148 sacks. I mean, when you're not protecting the quarterback, I don't know how you expect him to show any sort of success. But Tags, let's hear your quick pitch on why you think that, you know, Cutler was never given a fair chance in Chicago.
No, and not just the offensive line. That's a big thing. You know, that's look what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl when he didn't have an offensive line. If you were watching Jay Cutler during those years in Chicago, Jay Cutler was doing a lot of what he was doing. And Cutler had some mobility to his game. It's not like he was a statue. Yeah. He wasn't Eli Manning. Mm-hmm. So it was frustrating to me because, you know, it seemed like everything that they did, again, trading away Greg Olsen. If you can't make Greg Olsen work in your offense, then you are not a good offensive coordinator. I really don't care what else anybody has to say about it. He went through offensive coordinator. I think throughout his career with the Bears, he never had a coordinator for more than like a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever it was. And it's impossible to learn an offense. So I know some people will tie that and they'll say, well, that's Jay's fault because he didn't play extremely well. Well, part of that is because, again, he's looking at a new offense. He's dealing with the offensive line problems. When he came to Chicago, I mean, Devin Hester was his number one wide receiver for some of those years. Like, come on. Like, I mean, I know I'm rattling off excuses, but every quarterback has like issues to deal with. Jay had a barrage of them. And then when he came out in front of the media, they're asking him what the hell's going wrong. And then he's got Brian Urlacher talking crap about him, you know, saying that he's not a leader or whatever. That's on Urlacher. Like that's something that's just a D move. That's basically what I'll say about that. But everything. And I don't think Jay Cutler's a bad guy. And I think people started to see that on the TV show. It's just, he is who he is. Yeah. And basically he didn't care about the media. He's like, I don't have to, you guys don't like me. I don't like you. I'm not going to pretend that I do. So I'm going to be up here and you're going to think I'm disinterested. But in reality, that dude gave his heart on the field. I like Jay Cutler. I wish that it would have worked out differently in Chicago because I do believe that he still is probably the best quarterback that's ever played in Chicago.
Yeah. And that's something that I've said before. I think the biggest thing that Jay Cutler had working against him was just his face, like just the way that his face looks, because you said it, like he would give his heart on the field. You'd see this guy dive and like just getting crushed by a linebacker. Yeah. And then you see the heart on the field and then he just takes his helmet off and he's just got that face and he just looks disinterested. And that's what made people turn against him. I will die on that hill that the biggest thing Cutler had going against him was just his face. that poor guy, he was born with it and just could never shake it.
You know, and he, and his thing with the NFC Championship game, obviously people always point to that. Like, does anyone remember, and I hate to bring this up because he's kind of a friend of mine, but like LaDainian Tomlinson went through that too, where he was sitting on the sidelines of the AFC Championship game in 2007. And people, again, were like, why aren't you out there? It's like, these guys are human beings. Like, there's only so much you can do when you get injured and, you know, what you're going to do to yourself long term. So that kind of stuff always just bugs me.
Not everybody is Phillip Rivers. I mean, that dude playing through a torn ACL. Yeah, every time I hear that, I'm just like, dude, you're a maniac. I mean, he's got 9 kids. That makes it even tougher.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I'm in good company right now because I don't know too many people that are still out here, you know, pumping up Jay Cutler. But this helmet that I got right here,
Jay Cutler, Chicago Deep or Chicago Thin Crust, like this is your show.
I'm in good company right here. I picked some good guys. I'll tell you that.
Did you guys ever see the video for Cuddy Come Back?
I haven't seen that one.
No.
Oh my God. After this, I promise you, if there was a way to play it on this show, I would tell you to do it right now. But look it up on YouTube. Cuddy Come Back. It is the greatest YouTube video of all time for a Bears fan. I promise you, you will love it.
All right.
I just jotted it down. I'll be checking it out right after the show.
Yes.
So real quickly, we'll go into one more question here, and then I've got a final personal question that we'll wrap it up with. But we already talked about it a little bit, that this team right now is kind of stuck in that, like, floating around 500 purgatory where you're not getting a good pick, and it's just a tough situation to be, and it's something that I feel like Bears fans have kind of related to for the last 20 years or so. So there have been some reports, not reports, I'm sorry. There have been some rumors that the Bears might be open to trading away some of their big names, Akeem Hicks, Khalil Mack. And I was just looking at their ages and the contract that they still have left over, and I don't see how that's something that can really help us out. So just for anyone that doesn't have to, off the top of their head, Akeem Hicks, 31 years old. He's got a year and $12 million left. Khalil Mack, 30 years old. He's got 4 years and $48 million left. He's got an out after the 2021 season. But if we take that out, that's $89 million in dead cap over the next 3 years. So I don't think there's any way we can really cut him. I don't even know if on the trade market they have much of a value. So are you guys opposed to trying to get whatever you can right now and blow the team up? Or do you think we kind of stick with the core that we have and just keep hoping to patch it while we still have these elite defenders?
Well,
Tags, why don't you start us off here?
Well, they apparently in the trade that they were talking about for Russell Wilson, Khalil Mack was going to have to go back. That he was going to have to go to Seattle because there was no way to make it work salary cap reasons with the money we were inheriting with Russell contract, and it's like you had to mix and match because it's like getting rid of massive money. And yes, if I ran the Bears, first off, they're making it worse on Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace because it's like if you're saying, hey, we have to cut Kyle Fuller, that doesn't help. If you're going to allow Akeem Hicks to walk, it's like that's not going to help. Like if you're going to trade him away, you're going to trade him to a team that's a contender looking to trade a future pick is what you're looking for. So how is that going to help them improve this franchise? Meanwhile, they're coaching for their lives after this. You know what I mean? Even if they don't make it work with the Bears, Matt Nagy can be a head coach again somewhere or an offensive coordinator. So it's not like they're going to fall flat on their face. As Rank talked about earlier, Khalil Mack asked him to take games off. That's not going to happen. So it's like, I feel like the Bears, they're stuck in this bad limbo. And this is the part where I'm so frustrated with the franchise is because I don't know how they get out of it. And that's the realness of it is that the defense is now getting older. We didn't have draft picks for such a long time. So we don't have a young nucleus of star players that we're expecting to be really good. We don't have a quarterback that we're building the team around. We don't have a high draft pick. We're drafting 20th. I mean, I know you mentioned Mac Jones earlier. I don't think Mac Jones is falling to 20. And again, to move up in the draft to the point where you might be able to get him, if that's who you want, I think it's going to take too much. And then again, you're handicapping the franchise for the future. So it's like they're in a weird spot as a franchise. And it's been all these things that have been accumulating over the years. And unfortunately, yes, I would blow it up right now because I think that you have to. I think you have to be honest with yourself and say, is this a Super Bowl winning team? Do we have a team that can win a Super Bowl? And if the answer is no, then you have to kind of think about the future and say, hey, Hicks is going to be gone after this year. Mac is, he's coming towards the end of the prime of his career. So it's like you have to start thinking, what can get me the most in return? And those players do.
Yeah, I agree with you. What are you thinking, Adam?
It is really interesting. I was a couple of weeks ago, whatever, of the mind of like, let's see what happens. They got the good defense. I think that the switch at defensive coordinator is going to help get this unit back to the levels of Vic Fangio. Although with Kyle Fuller being gone, like, what are we doing now? Like the whole point of having a guy like Jalen Johnson is that he's a good player, but you have him opposite of Kyle Fuller. So that makes your defense tough to go against. And to me, I think that probably the best model for any team that's not good, that is going in on a quarterback, and I think the Jets should pay attention to this as well. What makes a lot of these teams so good is that you get that first 4 or 5 years of free money with your quarterback not costing you as much. And I think that the Bears are going to be in a position next year of, let's say they don't get Mac Jones. Let's say they draft a lineman, which might end up being the smartest thing. But next year, you're going to start off, assuming they don't draft a quarterback this year, you're going to start off with a brand new coaching staff, with a young quarterback like Mitch Trubisky, not like him, but I mean, like in a situation like that, it's like, let's go for it. Let's see what happens now. And you're going to end up seeing a lot of these guys walk or be moved on or something like that. So I'm not opposed to giving it like one more shot. Like that's still a playoff team. Maybe you look at some of the quarterbacks who've been in the Super Bowl in recent years, like Jared Goff was a Super Bowl quarterback. So maybe let's see what happens. Let's let's give it one more shot. This is a vet. Like, this is the age of this team is you might as well go for it. And if it doesn't, then I'm all about blowing it all up, see what happens. You're going to start off basically going from the studs and just rebuilding everything.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the last year. Well, I apologize. We went a little bit over time, but
that's my fault.
So much to talk about, and but I do want to finish off on a little bit of positivity because this has just been so much doom and gloom talking about the Bears in recent years. So we've all been fans of Chicago sports for a while. So I want to go around real quickly and hear what everybody's favorite memory is as a Chicago sports fan. Adam, we can start with you on this one if you got one fresh off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's got to be the Super Bowl. This is a moment, not how the afternoon finished, but a moment. But for me, it was
the same one.
Yeah, Devin Hester. Like I will not to bring not to make this dour or anything, but my dad has passed away. I'm a Bears fan because of him. So he had this starter jacket, this Bears starter jacket. It was his favorite piece of clothing. Never wear it. It's in the closet. It's covered. I'll break it out occasionally, but I did break it out for this Super Bowl. And I just remember I'm breaking it out. It's a cool thing. People love the jacket. It's old school and everything. And we're watching the game with a bunch of friends. We're at a bar in Las Vegas. And when that play happens, there is a table somebody spilt the table and just soaked this jacket. And everybody was so bummed, we're so sorry, it's your dad's jacket. I'm like, my dad would have loved that. He would have said it was worth it to be in that moment. And I just remember, again, the afternoon ended up blowing. But just in that moment of time, just the connection and just thinking about all my family members who were either watching that moment or were not there to be there, just what a special moment in time that was. If you just think of life as moments of time, I don't think that there's going to be one better than that. And so I'll always cherish that. So that's probably my favorite moment in Bears history.
How about you, Tags?
Oh man, I love that Rank brought up his dad. And I think that's what sports are, right? You grew up with your parents and your dad and whatever. So my dad, we watched Jordan, Michael Jordan, honestly, and I don't even tie it back to one single championship or whatever. I always tell people that I don't say this very often, but I say that I feel like I was honored to watch Michael Jordan play basketball. And I mean, I don't say that about many athletes. Tom Brady's very special in his own right. He's got that it factor, but Jordan, to watch him play, it's that's a once in a lifetime individual. And growing up and watching him with my dad and my brother, it was just no matter what, it was just the Bulls were always going to be there. And that was before, we had cell phones, before we had internet, before video game systems were a thing that we always played. It was just that was what you did every night. You sat down, you watched the Bulls, and you lived through the 72-10 season. And you got to see them, win 6 championships. So I honestly, I cherish all those. And that's growing up. That's why, seeing the Last Dance come on TV, it's just I'm glad they played tribute to that, because that was just legitimately, I know it was a very impressionable time in my life because, I was going through my teenage years, towards with that stuff, but it was special.
Yeah. That Last Dance, man. I don't know what I cried harder during, the Last Dance or the '85 Bears, but man, both of those got me. Those were rough. But thank you guys so much for coming on the show. This was a blast. I've had this idea of doing this with you two for a while, so getting 2 of my favorite analysts and Bears fans on here just to talk all things Bears. What I can't imagine is a better time. Right after free agency, right before the draft. There's a lot to talk about right now. So before we sign off, I want to give you guys an opportunity to just plug whatever you've got coming. If it's an article, shows, or anything, Adam, you could start us off here and let us know what you've got coming up.
Well, obviously, hopefully you guys watch NFL Network and all that stuff, but just my personal stuff, because my Instagram is Adam Rank NFL. YouTube is Adam Rank NFL. Those are the 2 ones where I couldn't get Adam Rank. Oh, it drives me crazy. And I've tried to get both of them. But in any event, check me out there. I'll be putting up content. And, of course, fantasy's coming up, free agency and all that stuff. So I'll see you guys there.
Cool. And then, Tags, before you sign off, I just wanted to give you a personal thank you real quickly, because when I first started in this industry, it was the 3rd article I had ever written. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I reached out to you and I asked you for feedback. And you gave me fantastic feedback and really helped me become a better writer. So I just wanted to give you a personal thank you for that before you plug your stuff. Just a great guy that has helped support me from the very beginning. So thank you for that.
Hey man, I couldn't be happier. Honestly, I love seeing guys like yourself come up. You're working through it. You're grinding through it. You're doing podcasts every single day. You're doing live streams. You're doing whatever. It's just Rank on TV. Every time I turn it on, he's on there. But it's It was a blast, honestly. Like, I don't even want to pump up my work here because I just want to tell you guys I had a blast talking football with you. And I think next time we should do this before, like during a Bears like press conference when, you know, Ryan Pace is up there talking about whatever. And every time he says that we're going to get better or we didn't do good enough, we just take a drink. And by the end of the show, I guarantee it, people will be hanging out because it's going to get better as time goes on because we're going to start cursing. We're going to do whatever. But no, seriously, thanks for having me on. It was a blast talking with you guys.
All right.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, this was seriously one of my favorite shows to date. It was awesome. So thank you guys so much. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge _FF, and you can find me live every Friday. We've got Michael Florio coming on this Friday.
Michael F. Florio, my guy.
Michael F. Florio.
Mike F. Florio. Yep.
You know what?
The
F stands for it's Frank. Like, his middle name's Frank, and I was like, bro, I want to start calling you Frankie Florio. Like, come on. That is the coolest name, but he wouldn't go for it. So he's due to Michael F. I'm like, that sucks. Frankie Florio would have been the best.
I will be sure to introduce him.
Yeah, Frankie,
I'm going to introduce him Friday as Frankie Florio.
Yes.
See him go, excuse me, we'll make it happen. And then next Tuesday, I've got Matthew Berry coming on, and then next Friday, I've got Denny Carter coming on. So a bunch of fun guests coming on over the next week. And you guys kind of kicked it off right here. So really, really appreciate you making the time. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their afternoon, and bear down.